I want to talk a little bit about intersectionality and what that actually means. In the examples that Emma's just provided, we can't see women as a homogenous group. 51% of the population are women, but within that we are women of colour, we are disabled women, we are unpaid carers, we are have caring responsibilities, we are LGBT, our first language might not be English. Women make up a very diverse set of people within Scotland, and as such we have to respect policy making in an intersectional way. If we were to look at domestic abuse policy, if we were to look at employability services, do they consider women as a non-homogenous group? Are they thinking about the needs of women who are coming in, who require more than what is invested in currently? Okay. Are we making presumptions about where they are at and what access to opportunity they have? So I want to talk a little bit about intersectionality, and although that is something that we are discussing in detail in year 3 as a council, it has to make up everything we talk about all of the time. Year 3 allows us to focus in on it and talk about whether we are meeting those needs, but every decision we take as a council, if it's not intersectional, it's not feminist. If it's not feminist, it's not working. That's the way that I see it. So for some of you, the word intersectionality might be part of your lexicon, but for some of you, it might not be. Now, in the past few years, it has certainly become part of Scottish policymaking and conversations around campaigning, but that's only in the last few years, and talking about it is good, doing something about it is better, and that's where we're looking to get to. So whilst it's become part of the language that we use, what does it actually mean? Well, this was formatted better when it was on my laptop, so sorry about that. But what does it actually mean? It's a term that was introduced first by Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a feminist academic in the States. If you've not heard her speak, if you have not read her books, do that. It is a gift. She used the term firstly in 1989 in her paper Demarginalising the Intersection of Race and Sex. What she was primarily talking about was the experience of African American women, black women, and the systems and oppressions that they are facing within the States. The intersection of sexism and racism is what she was talking about. You can face both of those things at the same time. I stand before you as a woman of colour and a Muslim woman. I can experience Islamophobia that is gendered. I can experience sexism and I can experience racism that is gendered. This all has an impact on how policy works for me, on how society works for me. And I am in a privileged position because I'm also educated. Technically, second language is English, and I've had education opportunity. I have financial sustainability. So there's privileges I have, but there's significant inequalities that I face. That's what intersectionality is about. It's simply a way of understanding how power enacts when you have these different dimensions. There's nobody within this room who is simply women. We are different ages, we are different classes, we come from different areas, rural or urban, whatever it might be, so therefore power and policy works for us differently. It has evolved since to talk about other intersections like class and LGBT, socioeconomic status, age, disability, etc. But it's really important that within this we do not forget that it originated as a term to talk about racism and sexism and how that intersects within it. So women's lived experiences do not exist in silos, so policy making can't exist in silos. If I'm talking about employability as an example, or domestic abuse as another example, if I was not to think about the cultural impact that women face, racism within that, access to opportunity within that, that is a policy that is not fit for purpose. And to give you an example of that, some people are taking photos of this slide, so I'm going to add on a couple of extra sentences so that they can do that. So to give you an understanding of this, whilst you're having these conversations, think about all the intersections that you have within yourself and whether that is thought about in your daily practice. So no matter what part of work you do, whether you are here as a campaigner, when you are doing campaigning activities, are you thinking about intersectionality and who is in the room? Us as a circle, we have to think, who is in this room, but most importantly, who is not in this room, who didn't have access to be in this room. As a council, how do we make this room a place that has a real representation of the intersections and that exist within Scotland, the experiences that exist within Scotland, and how are we thinking through an intersectional lens? Have you taken your photos? Excellent. So, to think about this, I want to focus on two recommendations that we made in our last report, because I think this will give a better understanding of what we are asking you in this room today. So one of the first ones was increasing women's representation in politics, and Jane, thank you for talking about what you did. Side note, if you are not signed up to the Women 50/50 campaign, you should be. But we talked about how representation, decisions that are made with a lack of representations mean those decisions are likely to be flawed because lived experience is not around that table when we're making those decisions. So when we talk about increasing the number of women's representation in politics, we've talked about considering legislated candidate quotas, and that has now become a recommendation in the report last year. But it's important that I tell you that no woman of colour has ever been elected to the Scottish Parliament. In the last council elections, the number of women of colour elected decreased from 5 to 4 women, not percentages, 5 to 4 women, okay? Now, if we only pursue status quo intervention and don't think through an intersectional lens, we will open access to women who already had opportunity to pursue politics, okay? We only provide systems, we only create systems, we only create policy that supports, and for want of a better phrase, the lowest hanging fruit. But we need to be looking above in those branches that aren't reaching access to opportunity, to use an extended metaphor. So actually, we need to be thinking about what are we doing to access and eliminate barriers to politics for women with caring responsibilities, working class women, women who are not in employment, because actually it's quite a financial strain to run for elected office. It's a strain on caring responsibilities to run for elected office. It is a strain and an assumption on the level of education you have and how many political acronyms you know to get into political office. The second example I want to give is women experience domestic abuse have sufficient access to expert legal advice and legal aid. It's fundamental, it's absolutely fundamental that we do that. But women living in poverty, migrant women, and women whose second language is English are most likely to be in need of that legal aid. So if we don't think about those intersections, then the intervention that we create might not do the very thing we want it to do. So policy coherence through an intersectional lens is good policy making. So today, all I'm asking is that you think about both gender mainstreaming and policy coherence must be built on intersectional thinking, as I've already said. But in conversation today and always, I want you to think about the ways in which women experiencing multiple discriminations are advantaged or most likely disadvantaged by how we make policy in Scotland right now. How can this be improved? Who gets to have a say? Who doesn't get to have a say, and how are we all going to take responsibility for sharing the platform so the women who don't have the mic usually now get the mic? Thank you very much.